They don't belong in first class, the gate agent muttered, brushing past two composed teenagers. But as they reached for their phones, no one knew this quiet defiance would trigger the CEO of the airline to shut down every plane in the sky. Story segment, 2,300 words. 17-year-old twin sisters Imani and Naomi Carter stood poised at the bustling check-in counter at Denver International Airport. Bright, confident, and dressed for travel in their honor society jackets, they were headed east for a college tour their father had long planned. Their father, William Carter, had insisted on booking first-class tickets, not for luxury, but for peace of mind. But that didn't matter to Brad Whitman, the white gate agent who glanced at their boarding passes with suspicion, before smirking. "These seats can't be right," Brad said sharply. "First class?" His tone was more accusation than question. Naomi kept calm. "Our father booked them directly with your airline." Brad rolled his eyes and tapped his keyboard. Then, without warning, he printed new boarding passes, coach seats. "There's been a change," he said flatly, shoving the papers toward them. "Next." Stunned Imani spoke, voice steady. "But our original seats were in row 2A and 2B. "Not anymore," Brad replied. "Take it up at the gate if you're not happy." Shocked and humiliated, the sisters stepped aside. But as Naomi unlocked her phone, Imani gave a subtle nod. "Call Dad." What Brad didn't know: William Carter wasn't just their father. He was the newly appointed CEO of the very airline he worked for. And his daughters were about to teach the company what justice looked like. As Naomi dialed, Imani kept her eyes on the terminal's departure screen. Their flight was still boarding first class, no less, but the new boarding passes had banished them to the back. William Carter was in a closed-door board meeting at Mid-Atlantic Airlines headquarters, an urgent strategy session with investors. "Unless it's an emergency," had said that morning. But to them, this was an emergency. Before Naomi could press, call Imani's voice broke the silence. "Let's wait. We'll talk to someone at the gate. Maybe it's just a mix-up," but it wasn't. At the TSA checkpoint, the sisters were randomly selected for extra screening. Vanessa Gentry, the agent in charge, pulled them aside with a smirk that barely masked her bias. "Hair like that always needs checking," she muttered as she tugged at Naomi's braids and unpacked their bags with zero care. Personal journals, medications, even school awards were treated like contraband. A nearby passenger began filming, but another TSA supervisor shut that down fast, threatening to detain the bystander for recording. 45 humiliating minutes later, Imani and Naomi retrieved their now disheveled bags. Imani's laptop was scratched, and Naomi's medicine lay scattered across a table. Still, they pushed forward, determined to resolve things at the gate. On the way, they stopped at Sky High Grill, an airport diner. The hostess, Tanya Maxwell, barely glanced at them before declaring a 45-minute wait, even though half the tables were empty. Seconds later, she warmly welcomed a white couple who walked in behind them. When the twins objected, the manager, Keith Allen, appeared. "If you keep raising your voice, he'll have to call security," he said, arms crossed, ignoring their calm demeanor. Before they could reply, a Latina waitress named Elena Ruiz whispered to them, sliding 2 food court vouchers into Imani's hand. "I saw everything. It'll be your witness. Don't let them bury this." Back in the terminal, Imani finally hit call. "Dad," Naomi said, as William answered, her voice barely holding steady. "They didn't just downgrade our seats, they humiliated us. Over and over." As they recounted every detail, names, badge numbers, locations, William Carter's silence said more than words ever could. Then finally he spoke. "Stay where you are," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "Emergency Protocol Alpha. Begins now." The terminal lights flickered, and in that moment Mid-Atlantic Airlines began to feel the tremor of justice about to erupt. Minutes after William Carter initiated Emergency Protocol Alpha, a quiet storm swept through Denver International Airport. One by one, departure boards across the terminal flickered, then changed. Flights marked "on time" were suddenly delayed gate, return for safety protocol. Confused passengers stared at the screens. Gate agents picked up phones, panic creeping into their voices. Every Mid-Atlantic Airlines plane nationwide was grounded. Back near Gate 34, Imani and Naomi sat on a bench, their phones ringing off the hook. Mid-Atlantic executives were now scrambling to do damage control. "We're arranging a private jet," one voice promised. "Would you accept a helicopter transfer to Boston?" offered another. But Naomi answered them all the same, "We're waiting for our father's instructions." Then came Richard Graham, the gate agent who had sneered at them earlier. He approached, sweating, his previous arrogance gone. Miss Carter, he stammered. "There's been a terrible mix-up. If you'll come with me, we've arranged a special flight." Imani didn't move. "No thank you. We're staying here." His eyes flashed with frustration. "Lying about who your father is won't help you." Naomi raised her phone, already recording. "Is that a threat?" That's when William Carter's voice rang loud and clear from the speaker. "Mr. Graham, this is William Carter, CEO of Mid-Atlantic Airlines. I've heard everything." Graham's face turned ghost white. Without another word, he stumbled backward and fled. Then the terminal grew still as every traveler's eyes turned to the flickering boards. Naomi whispered, "Dad just stopped the whole airline." Through the still active phone line, they heard their father's firm voice giving orders. "I want every flight held. Get me the Denver station manager now. Nobody boards until this is resolved." The system was no longer just inconveniencing two teenage girls. It was collapsing under the weight of its own injustice. And the people responsible, one by one, they were about to be called into the light. In less than an hour, what began as two teenagers being denied their rightful seats had become a full-scale corporate reckoning. While mid-Atlantic flights idled across the country, a digital war erupted behind the scenes. And this time it wasn't William Carter pulling the strings, it was his daughters. Naomi sat with her laptop open, her fingers flying over the keys. "I'm backing up every file, every message, every recording we've gathered today," she said calmly. "No one's erasing our truth." Imani, meanwhile, was on her phone speaking with Elena Riverathe, restaurant waitress, who had slipped them vouchers and promised to be a witness. "I've got videos," Elena said. "Keith was bragging about kicking you out. I've recorded him doing it to others too." Within hours, dozens of strangers, passengers, airport staff, even former employees were sending texts, emails, and videos. Witnesses from the check-in counter, the TSA screening, and the gate all came forward with accounts of what they'd seen. Naomi uploaded it all to a secure cloud server and created a public timeline of events. But Mid-Atlantic wasn't sitting idle. Behind closed doors, Victor Halston, the powerful board member who had always opposed Carter's leadership, was launching a smear campaign. He ordered IT staff to erase ticket records, wipe surveillance footage, and flood social media with fake posts about the girls. His allies leaked doctored disciplinary files, trying to frame them as entitled difficult teens. Only Victor didn't count on Naomi's tech skills. She intercepted the deletion attempt in real time. Then she called Calvin Shaw, the company's head of IT, directly. "We know what you're doing," she said. "You have two choices: help expose this or go down with it." After a long pause, Shaw sighed. "I'm with you," he said. "I'm securing the evidence now." By nightfall, the narrative had shifted. Instead of two disruptive girls, the world now saw two brave young women exposing a racist airline culture. The hashtags Mid-Atlantic Discrimination and #CarterTwinsTruth trended nationwide. The company's reputation was unraveling. What had started at Gate 34 wasn't just a travel incident anymore, it had become a national movement. The question wasn't whether people would believe Imani and Naomi Carter. It was whether Mid-Atlantic Airlines could survive the truth. By morning, Mid-Atlantic Airlines was a name on every news ticker in the country. Naomi and Imani Carter's story had sparked a media firestorm, drawing attention from lawmakers, civil rights organizations, and millions of outraged citizens. But while the world demanded answers, one man prepared to deliver them. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, William Carter stepped onto a sleek stage at the airline's Manhattan headquarters. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Flanked by his daughters on either side, the CEO of Mid-Atlantic Airlines stared down the storm and didn't flinch. "What happened to Naomi and Imani was not an isolated error," he began, his voice steady. "It was the symptom of a deeply rooted problem within this company and within this industry." Then he outlined a sweeping reform plan, mandatory anti-discrimination training for every employee, a whistleblower protection system, public reporting of all customer complaints, an independent review board with full authority. He even introduced a new performance metric: executive bonuses would now be tied to progress on inclusion and equity. But the most surprising move came last. "The employees who wronged my daughters, those who are willing to take responsibility, will not be fired," William said. "Instead, they will be part of rebuilding this company from the inside out. This is not about vengeance. This is about transformation." Some cheered his courage. Others criticized his restraint. But Naomi and Imani stood behind him proud. "This was never about ruining lives," Imani said during a follow-up interview. "It was about changing how lives are valued." Their message resonated. Within days, other airlines launched their own internal audits. Congress announced hearings on racial discrimination in air travel. And Victor Halston, the man who tried to cover everything up, was forced to resign from Mid-Atlantic's board in disgrace. Back in Denver, travelers noticed the difference. Agents were friendlier, TSA staff more respectful. And at Gate 34, a new plaque had been mounted on the wall. It read, "In honor of those who stood against silence, the Carter twins had turned pain into progress. Not just for themselves, but for every passenger who ever feared they'd be treated as less. And in doing so, they proved that when young voices rise with truth, the world has no choice but to listen." In the aftermath of William Carter's bold reforms, Mid-Atlantic Airlines experienced an unexpected transformation. Internally, employees who once dismissed discrimination as harmless misinformation began to confront uncomfortable truths. Trevor Whitman, Brad Reynolds, Richard Graham, Gregory Walsh, and even Supervisor Diane Blackett were asked to join an accountability council built to redesign company policies from the inside. Some resisted, defensive at first, but gradually many admitted they had been part of a broken system. Blackett's turning point came when she confessed she'd enforced bias against her own community, admitting, "I thought I was helping, now I see I was hurting." That moment marked a deep cultural shift within the airline. 6 months later, the transformation was tangible. Employee retention improved, passenger satisfaction across all demographics climbed, and executives discovered that ethical leadership drove loyalty and profit. Corporate clients, many concerned about public image and values, began favoring Mid-Atlantic for ethical travel policies. The CEO's controversial move to link executive bonuses to anti-discrimination metrics morphed from a risk into a guiding principle. On the very same Denver flight line where Naomi and Imani were once humiliated, the twins finally traveled again, this time without incident. Gate 34 felt different. The new gate agent, Priya Sharma, greeted them with a genuine smile. "Good afternoon, ladies. Boston today," she said, handling their first-class passes with routine efficiency and respect. No scrutiny, no second-guessing, just professional courtesy. After boarding, Diane Blackett, now visibly changed, approached them before takeoff. "I want to thank you," she said softly. "That day you stood together, you helped change us." The twins exchanged glances, gratitude and closure passing between them. It wasn't just a single apology. It was a symbolic gesture of real change. The ripple effect expanded beyond Mid-Atlantic. Federal regulators began formal investigations into inequitable airline practices. Congressional hearings convened to address systemic bias in air travel. Customer advocacy groups held workshops criticizing other carriers' culture. One by one, leaders in the industry publicly supported the idea that respect and fairness aren't just moral, they're essential business policy. But change was not just policy. It became lived reality. Inside terminals nationwide, staff members approached minorities with care. A TSA officer calmly complimented a traveler's cultural attire. A manager personally apologized for past mistakes. The twins' ordeal had shifted not just one airline, but a national aviation culture. Today, looking out the plane window as Boston's skyline rises, Naomi turned to Imani. 6 months ago, I never imagined we'd be here, she said quietly. Imani smiled. Our setback became our future. Their journey shows that even local injustice, if faced with courage and documentation, can catalyze sweeping institutional reform. That truth amplified is a force no boardroom can ignore. As their flight descended into Boston, Naomi reached into her backpack and pulled out a worn composition notebook. Inside were pages filled with sketches, notes, and reflections from the past 6 months. One page stood out titled in her neat handwriting, "Where It All Changed." Imani leaned over her shoulder, smiling at the doodle Naomi had drawn, Gate 34. The airline logo, and 2 girls standing tall with shadows stretching behind them, one shaped like their father, the other shaped like a crowd. In Boston, the Carter twins joined their father on stage at a community forum hosted by Mid-Atlantic's Clean Travel Initiative. Together, they spoke not as victims, but as change-makers. Their courage had inspired airline employees, airport staff, and passengers across the nation to speak out. Their message was simple. You don't have to be powerful to demand dignity, just unshakably honestly. Back home, weeks later, a bronze plaque was mounted at Gate 34. Truth boarded here, and it never flew alone again. When injustice confronts you, don't shrink. Document it. Speak it. Stand together. Because the truth, when spoken boldly, has the power to ground planes and lift people. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to speak up against unfair treatment? Share your story in the comments. We want to hear how you rose above it. Inspired by Naomi and Imani, hit like, tap, subscribe, and join our growing community of voices that refuse to stay silent. Because sometimes the quietest stand makes the loudest difference.